You're listening to the Hour of the Time. I'm William Cooper. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you have pen and paper, as always, by your side. Make sure that you remember my admonition. Listen to everyone. Read everything. Believe absolutely nothing unless you can prove it in your own research, your own investigation, in your own right. Now, when I say listen to everyone, read everything, believe nothing from no one, from no source, unless you can prove it in your own research, I mean including me, including your mother, including your preacher, your priest, your neighbor, your husband, your wife. This is the age of deception.
Never in human history has so few taken so much from so many as America's Illuminati and their warlords of Wall Street and Washington. In just 8 years, these banksters and international government gangsters took it from the greatest creditor nation to the largest debtor nation on earth. Our standard of living has dropped like a rock for 4 out of every 5 Americans. They've foreclosed on our homes, our farms, our factories. They've exported your jobs and surrendered our arms.
They want it.
A new world order. A new world order. A new world order. A new world order. The Illuminati wants you to be a slave from birth to grave. The banksters own the Federal Reserve. It's private. They own it. It's neither federal nor reserve. The cashiers make that fiat funny money stuff you call dollars for 2 pennies. They lend it back to us at full face value. Then charge you interest. You get the debt. They get the interest. They get the gold.
You get the shell. They want it.
A new world order. A new world order. A new world order. It is a big idea. It is a big idea. A new world order. Controls the CIA, the FBI, the ATF, and the FDA. They don't give a damn about the POW and the MIA. Hillary, Billary, Hitler, Marx, and Mao. They want a new world order. They want it all, and they want it now. This Illuminati imports the dope. They create the chaos, string us out, crush our hopes. They created AIDS. It's their designer disease to bring you down, to grovel on your knees. They want to vaccinate your child and give them the mark. They want to illuminate you and keep you in the dark. They want you to pay for it with plastic, surrender your soul. They want you under their thumb, under their control.
They want it all.
A new world order. A new world order. A new world order. It is a big idea.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is a big idea, but it is beyond the grasp of most people as to what it could possibly really mean. Everybody said, "This is nice. The world is coming together." I've heard this on many occasions from people who, in all other aspects of their lives, appear to be at least a little intelligent. But when it comes to these touchy-feely, fuzzy, emotional, liberal BS, it appears that their brain just drains right down into their shoes and stays there for a while. How in the world can anybody say that the New World Order, our one world government, our world federalism, or the New World Economic Order, I don't care which term you use, it all boils down to the same mistaken conclusion, when there is absolutely, ladies and gentlemen, nothing for you to base those feelings upon. For instance, here in the United States of America, we have a Constitution. This Constitution guarantees us a Republican form of government. Now, never mind the fact that the Constitution is in the process of being subverted. And a lot of what the Constitution limits government to is being ignored, and many of the rights protected by the Constitution for the American people have already been stripped from us and thrown in the trash can. Never mind that, let's look at the document itself. It is a document that tells us exactly what type of government we are supposed to have. It is, in fact, the supreme law of the land. Now, supreme law of the land means that it is the final word on any subject. It is the government, ladies and gentlemen, or at least what the government is supposed to be. We can read that document, the Bill of Rights, and the Articles in Amendment thereto, and we can see exactly what our government is supposed to be. We can see what powers have been granted to government, how those powers have been limited. We can see what powers have been granted to the states, or because they have not been prohibited to the states, nor granted to the federal government, reside within the states, and if the states fail to exercise those powers or to claim those powers, then they lie with the people. We know what we have. We know what we had. We know pretty much where we're going. And we know what it's supposed to be, which at the current time it is not. Now, there's no mystery in all of this, ladies and gentlemen. Why would somebody give up a document that guarantees their freedom, that recognizes individual creator-endowed rights of the people, and has set out clauses to protect those rights from being infringed upon by government or by anyone else? That limits the power of government, that creates opportunity. And in fact, was the document penned by our founders that for the first time in the history of the world ever truly set man free. Why would anybody give that up? For some vague promise of some undefined, unoutlined, unseen promise of some utopian world government that is supposed to guarantee your well-being. Everybody thinks that it will be some kind of wonderful dream come true. Yet there is no evidence of that. The fact that it's going to be socialist tells us an awful lot about what is coming, doesn't it? How can we tell? Well, it's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. We look at the history of socialism. We look at every country on earth that has a socialist government. We look at the ultimate extension of socialism, which is communism. We read the writings of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, the writings of V.I. Lenin, Stalin, Trotsky. We look at the great socialist experiment that was the Soviet Union. We can venture southward from our southern border to Cuba, and we can see how that has worked. And so we know that the great socialist dream is nothing but a lie. We know that the great socialist promise is nothing but a lie. We know that socialism, when absolutely applied, does not work. Has never worked. Can never work. Will never work. We know that socialism always results in loss of freedom and varying degrees of control over the population, which always increases as time goes by. These are not guesses, ladies and gentlemen. These are truths. And these are truths that anyone can discover upon the sloppiest, most basic investigation that can be conducted. These are things that we know. So why is it that a great number of the population keeps propelling themselves in that direction, which is guaranteed failure, based upon the theories and the philosophies of a man, Karl Marx, who was an abject, total failure in everything that he ever did in his life? He was a Jew who hated Jews. He hated blacks. It's in all of his writings. He was a racist. He made no secret that the purpose of socialism was the ultimate control of the masses. The man abandoned his family. Couldn't write very well. Most of his ideas and writings were abject and obvious plagiarisms from Friedrich Engels, who also supported him because he was not able to support himself. Karl Marx never made a nickel in his life. He was a parasite. And maybe that's why his system of socialism so appealed to him. You see, it is a religion for victims. Socialism, ladies and gentlemen, is a religion for victims. And without a victim class, socialism cannot exist. Why do you think they're trying so hard in this country to make every person some kind of a victim of something or someone? Because they must have more and more victims in order to convince them that socialism is the answer, because socialism promises a daddy to take care of the children who are victims of the world around them. Isn't that true? Well, of course it is, ladies and gentlemen. How do they bring this about? How do they fund these tremendous projects and think tanks and black projects and covert operations and propaganda machines that bring this thought process about? Because this is not a thought process that develops naturally in the minds of any individual human being. It is something that is inculcated, brainwashed, if you will, through a process known as psychopolitics. Psychopolitics. And next week, we're going to be covering brainwashing and psychopolitics, the Soviet system, which is, in fact, the international communist socialist system of bringing about the future that they perceive they want the world to be. But all this must be financed, ladies and gentlemen, and how is that done? Well, that's going to be the subject of today's broadcast. I'm going to tell you how it's done. I'm going to tell you where that money comes from. I'm going to tell you what that money is used for. I'm going to tell you into whose pockets it goes, and I'm going to tell you why. So you had better be prepared with pen and paper and an open mind. And remember what I told you. Read everything. Listen to everyone. Believe absolutely nothing unless you can prove it in your own research, in your own right, in your own investigations. Remember, the truth is elusive at best. And if you depend upon someone else to tell you the truth without doing your own checking, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to give you plenty of documentation today from which to conduct your research. And there's much more out there. Much, much more. And I'm going to begin, excuse me, I'm going to begin years ago when I was just a young man and had volunteered for Vietnam in my vast stupidity and ignorance, thinking that I would be serving my country was not true. Vietnam wasn't about this country or the Constitution or freedom or any of those things at all. I received orders, ladies and gentlemen, to report to the United States Naval Security and Intelligence School on Coronado Island at San Diego, which I did. While there, I was trained for many things. One of which was to function as a Pacific Area briefing team member, as a member of the Office of Naval Intelligence. I was trained on external and internal security procedures. I filled out all the paperwork that was necessary for me to receive the highest security clearances that could be obtained. I went to special schools for booby trap identification and disarming. And then, for some strange reason, after all of that specialized training, I was sent to Vietnam to a place called Camp Carter, which was the headquarters of Naval Security and Intelligence in I-Corps. At Camp Carter, I was invited into the commanding officer's quarters, and he asked me, "Cooper, how would you like to command a patrol boat?" Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's not every day that an enlisted man in the United States Navy is offered the command of a combat vessel in wartime. And so I did not hesitate at all. I said, "Captain, I would love to command a patrol boat, although I'm not sure that I have any of the qualifications that would be necessary for me to do such a thing." He told me not to worry about it and dismissed me. And within a couple of days, I received orders to report to the Da Nang Harbor Patrol commanding officer, and I did that. And I was told by him that I was going to be given command of a 45-foot picket boat. I had no idea what he was talking about. Never seen a picket boat in my life, didn't even know what one looked like. He said a load of them had just come in on a freighter, and they were moored to a buoy beside the Harbor Patrol Pier, and that I was to go down and go through all of those boats and take my pick of the one that I wanted. So I did that. I went through all the boats, and I picked the very best boat that was in the best shape, that needed the less maintenance and preparation for combat duty. And then I began to select a crew. Well, I served as a patrol boat captain with this picket boat in the Da Nang Harbor, which mainly was maintaining the security of the ships moored or anchored in the harbor, loading supplies for the war effort. And this picket boat was really something, ladies and gentlemen. I really had enough weapons and ammunition to do just about anything that needed to be done, anywhere that it needed to be done. And then later was transferred up to Qua Viet, near the DMZ, where I served again as a patrol boat captain, only this time as on a river, with the Dong Ha River Security Group, which was another branch of naval security and intelligence, as was the Da Nang Harbor Patrol. And up there, we participated in combat on a nightly basis. And that's no exaggeration at all. Every night, one or two, sometimes 3 or 4 boats on the river came under fire or brought the enemy under fire, and we participated in combat actions. While there, I earned the Naval Commendation Medal and the Naval Achievement Medal, both with the V for Valor. Our unit earned the Naval Commendation Medal and the Presidential Unit Citation, and a whole bunch of others that I can't even remember. When I left Vietnam, I went to the USS Charles Berry DE-1035 as an undercover agent for the Office of Naval Intelligence, actually ONI. And when I had uncovered what I was sent to uncover and made the arrest that I was instructed to make, I was then transferred to the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet and assigned to the Intelligence Briefing Team. At that time, I was a second-class petty officer. And when I was on watch, I was the petty officer in charge of the command center. And when I was not on watch, I served on the Intelligence Briefing Team for the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet. I saw everything, ladies and gentlemen, of a classified nature that came into that headquarters. I assisted in the preparation of all of the briefings that were ever conducted for the Admiral and his staff while I was assigned to that command, and to high-level government officials when they came to participate in those briefings. While on watch, I was the designated SPCAT operator, which is Special Category Top Secret Messages. I was the one who encoded messages on the KL-47 and sent them out when top secret sensitive information or sensitive compartmentalized information communications were sent directly from the command center. Now, you have to understand that normally they're sent from the communications center, which was on a level below the deck that the command center was on. But when a message needed to be sent immediately, I was the one who did that. When top secret messages came in on the KL-47, on the teletype, or when they were sent up to the command center from the communications center, all top secret messages, all top secret SI, or sensitive compartmentalized information messages passed through my hands while I was on watch. Now, I was not on watch every day, ladies and gentlemen, so I didn't see every single thing that ever came in while other people were on watch. But during my watch, I did. And as a member of the intelligence briefing team, I had access eventually to almost everything that would ever happened that the Admiral needed to know while I was attached to that command. And one of the things that I learned while I was attached to the Commander-in-Chief of the United States Pacific Fleet was that most of all of the drugs that come into the United States of America, ladies and gentlemen, are brought in through the intelligence community, specifically under the oversight of the Central Intelligence Agency. I learned that these operations had been set up in the early 50s in order to fund black projects and intelligence operations that could not be allowed to come under the oversight of anyone in government or of the Congress. And that in order to bring about a peaceful world under the United Nations, vast amounts of money were needed for propaganda efforts and for subversions of the governments of the sovereign nations worldwide, including the United States of America. Now, this may be a little difficult for many of you to swallow, but nevertheless, it is true. And I am not telling you third hand or fourth hand. I am telling you of my own experience. I am an eyewitness. It is a fact. Everyone in the intelligence community knows this. Everyone in the Federal Bureau of Investigation knows this. Everyone who has ever conducted any investigation into the source of drugs that enter the United States of America knows this. Many studies have been made, many books have been written, many congressional investigations have been conducted, and they always end at the doorstep of the Central Intelligence Agency, without fail, without exception, always. Now I want you all to close your eyes. Everyone listening to this broadcast, close your eyes right now. I'm going to give you a little simple demonstration in common sense. You need to know this, and you need to conduct this little experiment. Close your eyes, everyone. Lean back. Just let your head relax. Relax your neck muscles. Close your eyes. And then adjust for a few seconds. And then I want you to use your imagination, just like you did when you were a child. And on the inside of your eyelids or in your mind, I don't care how you choose to do it, I want you to picture a map of the United States of America, including Hawaii and Alaska. And if you want to, if it's easier, you can even include the nation of Canada, because it applies. Then on this map, I want you to draw the lines of all of the different states. If you're not absolutely accurate, don't worry about it. I think that most of you will be able, with your memory, to pretty accurately depict a map of the United States of America in your mind. After you have delineated the boundaries of all of the states, I want you to put a dot on that map for every city and town and village that exists in this great nation, everywhere. Now, if you're really doing it correctly, you should have so many dots on that map that you probably couldn't count them in quite some time, because that's really how many cities and towns and villages there are in this country. Now, I want you to understand, while you're sitting there with your eyes closed, looking at this map with these thousands and thousands and thousands of dots on it, I want you to understand that at any time, any hour, any moment of any week or month or year, in any of those cities or towns or villages, at any time, anybody who wants to can purchase any type of drug that they want with no problem whatsoever. Now, ladies and gentlemen, realizing that, you must realize that there is an organization set up with a logistics system that is able to grow, harvest, refine, manufacture, transport, and deliver all of these drugs to all of these cities, towns, and villages with an umbrella of security and protection that is the best in the world, bar none. I want you also to understand, while you're conducting this little exercise, that the amount of money produced by this network of drug sales on all levels, production, manufacture, wholesale, and retail, is an amount beyond your capability to even comprehend. Now, if you understand all of those things, you can now open your eyes. And while you have your eyes open, you can think about everything that I've just told you, and I'll be back to... Haven't you ever wondered, ladies and gentlemen, how the United States government can track a piece of technology from manufacture to wherever it ends up in Iraq or Iran, anywhere around the world, anytime they want to? But they can't identify and arrest those who are bringing the drugs into this country. And they never will, because it's them to begin with. You see, let me explain to you what drugs are really doing besides what you think they're doing. You see, drug use is a victimless crime, which is an oxymoron. You cannot have a victimless crime, ladies and gentlemen. You must have a victim to have a crime. So this whole thing, these types of so-called crimes never existed in the history of our country until they were created. And drug use has been as much a part of the American scene since its very beginning as drinking tea or coffee. If you don't believe that, then you just start studying the history and the truth of drugs. Almost every medicine that was ever sold in a drugstore contained some kind of drug or other that is now illegal. Coca-Cola, in fact, ladies and gentlemen, began and became so popular and cornered the soft drink market by addicting its customers to cocaine, which was a major ingredient in Coca-Cola. What a way! What a way to establish a monopoly with your product. But that's something that you need to dig up on your own, in your own time, because there's more important things that we need to be discussing right now. Why did they have to create a whole new class of crimes that by definition are not crimes at all, and that no one had ever been concerned about in the history of this country, because drug use had never presented a big problem in this country until drug use was made a crime. Now, folks, in order to understand this, you're going to have to put aside your preconceived prejudices and notions and what you think you know about drugs, because most of it is just simply not true. And I'm not advocating drug use. I do not use drugs. I could care less. Except for the fact that it is being used to help destroy this country. You see, drugs do several things. Number one, as long as drugs are illegal, the price of these drugs can be maintained at a much higher level than they ever would be if they were not illegal. This produces unbelievable amounts of money that you cannot even conceive of, and that nobody really has a real figure to represent because it's all hidden. What we do know, ladies and gentlemen, this is what we do know, that the entire sale of drugs in the United States of America produces an amount of money greater than the gross national product every year. That's what we do know. We don't know how much more than that is actually represented in those transactions, because it is much more than that, I can assure you. Where does all this money go? But more important than that is that you understand that this money is generated and it's going someplace. Now, one thing that you may not have realized in the past is that drug addiction is a form of slavery. It is enslavement of those addicted. And those addicted are at the mercy of their slave master and will do his bidding, whatever that bidding happens to be. It is a form of euphemistic slavery, but nevertheless, it is slavery. A person addicted to drugs must have those drugs. Must have those drugs. That person can no more do without those drugs than all the rest of us could do without water. They must have those drugs. It is a physical and mental addiction from which they cannot escape. Now let that sink in. And because they are enslaved, they are used by their masters. For instance, by creating victimless crimes which hurt no one except those who participate in drug use, and whether you make it legal or illegal or just ignore it altogether, people who are going to be addicted to drugs are going to be addicted to drugs regardless. The problem with it is, because it is a crime now, they must be arrested, they must go through the court system, and they must ultimately be imprisoned. The United States of America now has in its prisons, ladies and gentlemen, more people than any other nation in the entire world per capita. 5 out of every 6 of those people in prison are there because of drug use, are in some manner were participating in the sale or profit of drugs on some low level. And I mean low level. They're just the local guy that stands on the corner and sells the drugs to whoever drives by and wants to buy them. The pusher, as he's called. Nobody is in jail, ladies and gentlemen, who is at the very highest or even middle echelons of this process. Those people aren't touched ever. They're protected, guarded, concealed. You see, the drug war is a sham. It is, in fact, a lie. It's not a war on drugs at all. It is a war upon the Constitution for the United States of America and the Bill of Rights. In order to get you to give up your freedoms, all they have to do is withdraw in whatever area they wish to increase the crime rate. They withdraw the supply of drugs. So there are more people who want less drugs, and at the same time, because of the law of supply and demand, which dictates price, the price escalates way up beyond the ability of those who could afford to purchase those drugs to now be able to obtain them. So now, in order to feed their addiction, which they must feed, they must commit crime. They must rob. They must steal. They must mug. And yes, even murder. In order to obtain the money to feed their addiction. The crime rate and statistics go through the roof. The public, the sheeple, then cry out, "Oh, we're in danger, they're going to come and kill us in our bed." When the truth is, ladies and gentlemen, most of this crime stays in the neighborhood where these people live. Where they work, where they play, where they indulge in their habit. But the middle class that's comfortable is afraid. Their security is threatened because they see numbers. Never mind, they don't understand how to interpret these numbers. They now scream for more control. Polls are conducted where they are asked if they are willing to give up some of their freedoms in order to get the drugs and the crime off the streets. And they say, "Yes, oh please!" And on their knees they beg, "Please take away our freedoms in order to get the drug and crime off the streets." The city, the county, the state, and the federal government enact laws which take away those freedoms, which give more powers to the police and to government. When these laws are passed, they bring more drugs into the area because they cannot cure the addictions, ladies and gentlemen. They bring more drugs into the area quickly. They lower the price. The crime disappears. And you believe that by giving up some of your freedoms, you have succeeded in your war upon drugs and crime, and nothing could be farther from the truth. The drugs are still there. The crime can be created again by the same process. So you have enslaved a certain portion of the population. You have rendered them ineffectual as people. You have stripped them of their dignity. You have made them outlaws. They can now be manipulated to create crime or to make crime seem to disappear at will. It funnels unbelievable amounts of money into the pockets of those who are trying to bring about world government. For it goes into the coffers of the international socialist subversive networks, into black projects that you cannot imagine, into the development of the technology in these black projects that will be used to control the population of the world in the future world totalitarian socialist utopia. And as soon as that utopia becomes a reality, ladies and gentlemen, and they no longer have the need for this process, drugs will be made legal and will be sold everywhere, and anyone will be able to buy them. Because they also know that if you're addicted to drugs in the New World Order, and you can buy them freely at a low price anytime you want, and they make sure that you have a job 4 hours a day where you can earn enough money to be able to feed your drug habit, you will never give the puppet masters one single bit of problem in the New World Order. You see, you will be a slave to many things at that point. Now, I reported all this in my book, Behold a Pale Horse, many years ago. I was lecturing about this in 1988. Everybody said I was crazy. Well, over the years, everything that I have written, with the exception of a few things in my book, have come true. Everything that I've warned the American people about has actually happened. It's now William Cooper is not crazy anymore. He has now reached the status declared by William Jefferson Clinton in a White House memo as being the most dangerous radio host in America, because he tells the truth and he documents it. And so, for the second hour, you're going to get another aspect of all of this, and you're going to get all the documentation that you need to be able to research this and determine on your own whether or not I have told you the truth. What you're going to find will amaze you, because I am telling you the truth. And every area of your research will do nothing but verify it. Now I'm going to tell you who set up these operations to begin with. It was George Herbert Walker Bush, when he was the president and CEO of the offshore oil division of Zapata Oil. George Bush was a Central Intelligence Agency operative since he left Yale, ladies and gentlemen, and was intimately involved in the invasion of the Bay of Pigs. In fact, one of the ships carrying supplies for the Cuban rebels was named Barbara. Another one was named Zapata. And Georgie Boy set up the importation and sale of drugs into this country in the early 50s by bringing them in from Central and South America on shrimp boats and fishing boats to the offshore oil platforms, where the cargoes were transferred to crew boats and sometimes to helicopters, and were brought in bypassing completely any customs or law enforcement inspections. Since then, this whole process has become much more sophisticated, and it is, in fact, an octopus that encompasses and has corrupted all levels of just about all of the city, county, and state governments in this country, and most of the officials, judges, and police organizations that exist in America. An umbrella of protection exists that, ladies and gentlemen, is impenetrable. And everyone who has tried to penetrate it and actually go after the real cause and the real leaders and the real kingpins of this operation always, without exception, either end up dead or standing in front of the national security apparatus where they are told in no uncertain terms not to proceed any farther. Don't go away. I might be back. To children and their grandchildren is being destroyed. How could anyone love their children and allow that to happen? Well, that was a big problem for me for a long time, ladies and gentlemen, until I discovered the root of that attitude lies in the belief of the Christians of America that all of this is the fulfillment of prophecy and is being brought about by the hand of God, and the attitude is, quote, "Who am I to resist the hand of God?" end quote. There's a great number of the Christians in this country believe erroneously that they're going to be raptured, which means they're going to be lifted up into the air to meet with Jesus and will not have to go through any of this. Imagine their surprise when they find out that that's not going to happen. It won't happen. They're going to be stuck here with everybody else and live in this enslavement. Imagine all these people when they find out that it was really brought about by the hand of man and not by the hand of God. What is the knowledge that they have participated in the enslavement of their children and their grandchildren and their progeny for as long as this enslavement lasts? What is that going to do to them? You see, I have a feeling that many people are going to lose their minds over this when they discover the truth of it. They're all expecting Jesus to save them tomorrow. I've had so many of them tell me Jesus is coming. It's the end of the millennium. He will be here in just a couple of more years. If you read your Bible, it tells you that when you know that Jesus is coming, He will not be here. And I watch these puppet masters, these so-called preachers and evangelists and ministers, every Sunday leading their flocks to be sheared and then up to the gates to the slaughterhouse. And I watch these people follow them without question, as if they were not born with a brain at all. Because most of what these people say, the Bible says, is a lie. Most of what these people say is going to happen is a lie. Most of what these people tell these people at these meetings and on television around the world is just quite simply lies. You see, they are the Valium that keeps Christians from doing what they know they should do, and that is resist evil wherever and whenever it presents itself. And always do the right thing when it is required. Seek ye the truth, and the truth will make you free. Nothing else can do it. Shockwaves should have jolted America, ladies and gentlemen, when the news broke in England a few weeks ago. Most Americans don't have satellite receiving stations, so they don't know what's happening in the rest of the world, because what's reported in Switzerland, and in Bonn, and in London, and in Pretoria, South Africa, and in Melbourne, Australia, and in Delhi, India, and Moscow is never reported in the United States. We are, ladies and gentlemen, an isolated people as far as the news of the world is concerned. We don't even know what's happening outside of our borders. We are the only country in the world where that happens. And most Americans have never thought of it. Headlines in London: the CIA actively encouraged drug trafficking in order to fund right-wing Contra rebels in Nicaragua during the 1980s, and a CIA agent in Nicaragua was employed to ensure the money went to the Contras and not into the pockets of drug barons, end quote. That was a major story, the London Times. It was a major story on ITV. But the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the Los Angeles Times haven't even mentioned it, ladies and gentlemen. Instead, when blacks in Los Angeles became upset because the CIA was the one that they had discovered was bringing the drugs into the ghettos, no, what these papers printed was Mr. Deutsch's denial that the CIA has ever participated in drug running. And of course, what did you expect? Just a few months earlier, Mr. Deutsch had been in front of a congressional committee justifying why the CIA should still be able to maintain reporters, editors, members of the press, and publishers on the payroll of the Central Intelligence Agency. And that went right over the heads of every American that I have ever talked to, yet it was big news on television. It played for hours on C-SPAN. It was reported by CNN, ABC, CBS, and NBC. And not one American questioned the CIA having reporters, editors, and publishers on their payroll. And you wonder why and how and for what purpose the news is being controlled. Haven't you ever, ladies and gentlemen, got the hint When you look at ABC, and they're telling you a story, and you switch to CBS, and it's the same story in the same words, and you switch to ABC, it's the same story in the same words, you switch to CNN, it's the exact same story being told to you in exactly the same words, and these are supposed to be separate, independent news organizations working for separate, independent news networks. What is the matter with you? There's a loose wire somewhere in your head, ladies and gentlemen. How is it that you can't find that loose wire and just, all it takes is a drop of solder? Solder, ladies and gentlemen, which is commonly known as common sense. Common sense is nothing more than the ability to digest information and come to a logical conclusion based upon the information that you have digested. On August 13th, from Ron Reed, 1996, an interesting story appeared in the San Diego Union Tribune. According to this report, former Drug Enforcement Agency agent Celerino Castillo stated that he and 3 other ex-narcotics agents were willing to testify before Representative Robert Torricelli's proposed subcommittee on the intelligence community and human rights violations in Guatemala and Central America regarding the extent of direct involvement by the Central Intelligence Agency in international drug trafficking. The estimate he gave the newspaper was that approximately 75% of the drugs that enter the United States do so with the acquiescence or direct participation of the United States and foreign Central Intelligence Agency agents, the Mossad, the British intelligence organizations, and several others. Several years ago, the Senate Subcommittee on Terrorism, Narcotics, and International Operations, which were headed by Senator John Kerry, held hearings on allegations that the Contra forces fielded by the United States in its war against Nicaragua were using national security as a cover for cocaine smuggling. Oliver North, who was one of the primary organizers of the terrorists, wrote in his diary that at least $14 million that went to his arms operations came from drugs. And you all love him. He almost got elected to the Senate in Virginia. In its final report, the subcommittee was able to establish, despite stonewalling by the Reagan administration and shortages of staff and time that caused it to cut short many intriguing leads, that involvement of the Contras in drug smuggling had been pervasive, with at least 4 of the humanitarian organizations set up to funnel tax money to the front being run by known drug traffickers. Other published reports in the mid-'80s indicated that the Afghani freedom fighters that the CIA armed and trained in its biggest operation of the post-Vietnam Cold War were responsible for between 40 and 80% of the heroin coming into the United States during those years. They would furnish the intelligence community with heroin, and the intelligence community would give them arms and steamer anti-aircraft surface-to-air missiles. Nor is the involvement of the Central Intelligence Agency and its sister agencies in the international narcotics pipeline a recent phenomenon, ladies and gentlemen. In the 1950s, there was the Burmese and nationalist Chinese Golden Triangle, source of most of the world's opium, funneled across the Pacific Ocean to Central and South America, across land to fishing boats, to the offshore oil well platforms of Zapata Oil, and then into the United States, all headed up by George Herbert Walker Bush. In the 1960s, General Vang Pao and the Hmong growers, who served as the CIA's secret army in exchange for the agency's aid in transporting its opium to the West. And in the 1970s, the rogue operations of Theodore Shackley, Edwin Wilson, and the Australian Nugan Hand Bank, rogue only in the sense that the CIA maintained its deniability, and jettisoned the high-level officers in charge when their role threatened to become known. All this documented in my book, Behold the Pale Horse. And throughout, there were, of course, the experiments with LSD on U.S. citizens, along with other operations whose records were deliberately destroyed when Congress began investigating them after Watergate, but nevertheless enough survived so that we knew that this was conducted under an operation called MK Ultra, and that Dr. Timothy Leary was working for the Central Intelligence Agency and helped addict tens of thousands of our young people to LSD and other drugs. Indeed, the complicity of the United States and other intelligence communities in the drug trade, ladies and gentlemen, is so widespread that last year, Shapolsky Publishers titled an expose by former CIA agent Ken Bucci, quote, CIA, Cocaine in America, end quote. There are a number of other well-documented books that have traced these sordid facts. Among the best, folks, are Alfred McCoy's classic entitled The Politics of Heroin, originally published in 1972 as The Politics of Heroin in Southeast Asia, and reissued in greatly revised and expanded format in 1991. The Great Heroin Coup, Drugs, Intelligence, and International Fascism by Danish journalist Heinrich Kruger, published in 1980. The Big White Lie, The CIA and the Cocaine Crack Epidemic by former top DEA agent Michael Levine, published in 1993. Cocaine, Politics, Drugs, Armies, and the CIA in Central America by Peter Dale Scott and Jonathan Marshall, published in 1991. The Crimes of Patriots, A True Tale of Dope, Dirty Money, and the CIA by former Wall Street Journal reporter Jonathan Whitney, published in 1987. In Banks We Trust by the late Penny Lernoux, published in 1984. Storming Heaven, LSD and the American Dream by Jay Stevens, published in 1987. The chapter titled Noises Off Stage, regarding CIA MK Ultra experiments using LSD on unsuspecting American citizens in the 50s and 60s, and Acid Dreams, the CIA LSD in the 60s Rebellion by Martin Lee and Bruce Schlain, published in 1985. But you see, folks, despite overwhelming evidence of the direct involvement of agents of the state in pushing both heroin and cocaine, the official stance of the apparat is that it is diligently pursuing a, quote, zero tolerance, end quote, strategy aimed at eliminating the, quote, scourge of illegal drugs, end quote, from our society, and nothing could be further from the truth. The war on drugs is not a war on drugs at all, but is a war on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. As the cliche has it, the first casualty in this war, ladies and gentlemen, has always been the truth. You see, we are now in the 24th year of the drug war, a war first declared by Richard Nixon during his re-election campaign, and rededicated, as the Boston Globe noted, by every president within living memory. Has this war done anything? Has drug use gone down? Not at all. Not at all, ladies and gentlemen. The population has increased. Drug use has gone up with the increase in population, and even above that. But as a result of this war, the United States prison population is larger than any other nation in this world per capita. Five out of every 8 federal prisoners are in for drug-related crimes, primarily personal possession of marijuana, referred to by a DEA administrative law judge as, quote, the safest therapeutically active substance known to mankind, end quote. And on the state level, it's 5 out of 6, ladies and gentlemen. Growing an acre of hemp or marijuana can net you the death penalty while the crime bill presently before Congress would strip courts of their jurisdiction over prison conditions, declaring that routine brutality and stifling overcrowding are, by legislative fiat, neither cruel nor unusual, certainly not unusual, and certainly not today. Not unusual at all. Federal forfeiture laws have ensured the deepest levels of corruption of local law enforcement officials all across the country, as municipalities and counties, strapped for cash, have taken advantage of the provisions that allow the agencies to keep assets supposedly accumulated through drug profits without even having to go through the rigmarole of convincing a jury of guilt, without, in fact, having to even bring charges at all. Most of you don't realize it, that anybody can make an anonymous report to the local police department that you are a drug dealer. And before the sun dawns the next morning, you can all be lying naked on the floor, having been stripped searched of all your bodily orifices, in front of all of your family members, and having occurred to all of the family members, except the most minor children, holes punched in your walls, sofas and mattresses ripped to pieces, chairs cut apart, ceilings torn. One contractor told me, ladies and gentlemen, that a whole home, a house that has been searched by law enforcement for drugs, has to be condemned because it cannot be repaired or brought back to livable conditions. All this can be done and is being done across this country without a warrant. Without any kind of lawful probable cause. All property, bank accounts, cars, vacation cottages, clothing, RVs, trailers are seized and can be sold at auction without ever bringing any charges, without anyone ever having been brought to trial or convicted or pleading guilty or anything. And they can never, and as far as I have been able to determine, have never been able to reclaim their property or be reimbursed properly for it. And all of this is unconstitutional, of course, because the Constitution says that no property may be taken without just compensation. It doesn't make exceptions for anything whatsoever. It specifically says nothing can be taken without just compensation. Period. And it is supposed to be the supreme law of the land. Police forces, ladies and gentlemen, as I am speaking to you from Philadelphia to Los Angeles and all points in between, are under investigation for fabricating evidence, torturing prisoners to obtain confessions, and numerous other violations of fundamental rights, primarily in drug cases, and primarily, though by no means exclusively directed against minorities. In Los Angeles County, no white person has been prosecuted through the federal courts on crack cocaine offenses in recent years. The state courts, through which their cases are channeled, average 8 years less in sentencing for the same offense than the feds who concentrate on blacks and Latinos. I told you in my book that these people are considered to be useless eaters and are targeted anyway. Nationally, the first-time possession of powder cocaine, an expensive form of the drug favored by white lawyers and yuppies, is treated 100 times as leniently as first-time possession of the same amount of the crack form, which is cheap and favored by poorer, darker inner-city residents. The so-called zero-tolerance game has also been used to accustom the average citizen to intrusive urine tests, radar surveillance of neighborhoods, random stop and searches of automobiles or persons, and other tools of the totalitarian corporate socialist state. Nazi means German National Socialist Workers' Party. The Nazis were socialists. Socialists are Nazis. Drug hysteria among officialdom, whether genuine or manufactured to serve the agency and agenda of oligarchy, is so pronounced, ladies and gentlemen, that bills are introduced to deny tax-exempt status to any organization that proposes the legalization of drugs, which is a position taken by such radicals as pundit William F. Buckley, former Secretary of State George Shultz, and Baltimore Mayor Kurt Schmoke. Now, folks, if war is the logical extension of diplomacy, organized crime is the logical extension of business. It is sharp practice turned murderous, tax avoidance made systematic, competition followed to its logical conclusion. And that is a direct statement, a direct quote from a 1980 Forbes Business magazine article. In case you think I'm being unfair to business, it was business who said this. During a brief lull in its habitual somnolence throughout the Reagan area, one of the sleepy lapdogs of this fourth estate had the temerity to object to National Security Advisor John Poindexter's memorandum in which he had outlined and subsequently carried out a program of disinformation aimed at the domestic media in order to build a consensus for an attack on Libya. In response, he blandly quoted Churchill to the effect that the truth was so precious that it had to be protected by a bodyguard of lies. Can you imagine such arrogance? Part of the reason, ladies and gentlemen, for prohibiting discussion of alternatives such as legalization is that the proponents of tough love and tougher sentences frequently have no honest argument to make whatsoever, so that in a genuine debate they would be almost certain to lose. You see, nobody seemed to have learned anything from Prohibition. What happened? Well, you had some people getting drunk. And yeah, they ruined their careers. And yeah, they weren't able to make any money and feed their families. So what happened? You outlaw booze, and these same people and many more. You see, when you deal with morals, ladies and gentlemen, on a level such as this, you're dealing with what's called vice. That is that little creature in all of us that is sometimes portrayed as sitting on our shoulders, whispering in our ear, telling us to do something that we know we should not do, or to take the easy way, or the way that feels good, or to escape from reality by inebriating ourselves with alcohol and drugs. And we all have our vices. I don't care who you are. Don't ever get in my face and tell me that you have not at some time or other during your life been a human being. Because I will call you a liar just as quick to your face. You cannot legislate these things away, ladies and gentlemen. What happened when Prohibition was implemented was that more people sought out alcohol and places to drink alcohol. And many people who never had anything to do with alcohol began to manufacture alcohol in their bathtubs because they could make a quick profit from it. It created a huge organized crime network that we have not rid ourselves of to this very day, that did not exist before Prohibition was created. And the drug war is doing exactly the same thing. What happened when Prohibition was done away with? The drinking of alcohol went down, ladies and gentlemen. Organized crime lost its biggest source of revenue. speakeasies and honky-tonk joints all over the place went out of business. And it never stopped anybody who wanted a drink from getting a drink, just like the war on drugs today has never stopped anybody and never will stop anybody who wants to get high on drugs from doing so. And you can sputter and bluster and argue and say whatever you want. What I just told you is the truth. And that's what you had better learn to deal with. In 1989, Parents for a Drug-Free America was forced to acknowledge that it had been using footage of the brainwaves of a person in a coma to represent those of a person under the influence of marijuana. A lapse that they indicated they felt perfectly justified in undertaking, though they refrained from following Poindexter's example in quoting Churchill. During the campaign to reinstitute prohibition in Alaska, a DEA officer claimed at a meeting in Anchorage that no one ever died from tobacco use. Other troopers in the bodyguard that surfaced during that extended campaign were the old gateway drug argument, the claim that marijuana grown then was more than 10 times as powerful as that grown 15 years earlier, and the insinuation of permanent sterility from casual use, all lies. And remember, I don't advocate drug use. Don't use drugs. Don't advise anybody to use drugs. But I'm not stupid enough to think that I'm going to stop them from doing it if they really want to. Because if the largest police state ever created in the history of the world, that has imprisoned more people in the history of the world than any other country in the history of the world per capita, can't stop them, who am I to think that I can do it? And who the hell are you to think that you're going to do it? After 24 years, you haven't done it, and in the next 24 years, you're not going to do it either. Every major episode of drug hysteria in this country, ladies and gentlemen, has been manufactured through the adroit use of lies and propaganda, combined with appeals to fear and racism to divide the nation, to create a crime wave that should never have existed for crimes that are not crimes at all. In order to enslave a certain segment of the population, in order to manipulate them so that another segment of the population will consent to give up their rights endowed by their Creator upon birth and protected by their Constitution, so that they can bring about the utopian socialist world, utopian BS lie. Many of you go along with it. Most people don't really think at all. They follow the lead of others who have done the thinking for them and are manipulating them and deceiving them into the world that they want, not the world that we want or that you want. You don't even know where you're going. At the turn of the century, folks, lurid stories of opium fiends and dens of iniquity, illustrated with drawings of slimy Orientals helping disrobe an innocent-looking Caucasian woman, helped lead to the passage of the first United States anti-drug legislation, which was the Harrison Act in 1914. The headlines of the time linked cocaine usage with race riots, while New York police blamed no less than 60% of all violent crime on the use of the drug and proposed deporters users to addict farms, and then these very same police officers, mayors, city councilmen, legislators, governors, and distinguished citizens sat around the drugstore counter drinking their dosage of cocaine in their bottle of Coca-Cola. What hypocrisy, what stupidity, what apathy and ignorance has brought us to this point, ladies and gentlemen. God gave us a brain. And like Rush Limbaugh, most of us choose to sit on it, or tie it behind our back, or whatever it is that he does with half his brain. I am alternately driven to hilarious laughter or profuse tears over this. Does it sound familiar? I was talking about the turn of the century, ladies and gentlemen. Doesn't it sound familiar? Of course it does. Also familiar was the strategy adopted to combat dangerous drugs: blame foreigners. While Americans were consuming 10 times more drugs than the residents of any other country, authorities blamed supplier nations such as England and Japan, threatening to send the fleet to cut off the source of supply. Do you know that during World War II, the United States government paid farmers to grow marijuana? It was the biggest crop in the nation. All of the rope and line on Navy ships was made from hemp, marijuana. Many of the uniforms and pieces of equipment were made of woven hemp fibers. Most of you did not know that either, did you? Amazing, isn't it? Just absolutely amazing. You know that in many parts of America, huge, vast amounts of marijuana grows wild because during the war, that's where they had the marijuana crops. They just can't get rid of the seeds. They just keep falling out and growing again. Now, who do we blame? Colombian drug lords. Are you kidding me? You guys really buying this story? These guys down in South America with a high school education, these guys are growing all these drugs, processing them, manufacturing the end product. They're transporting it all to the United States of America, and they have this brilliant, genius, logistic supply line that takes these drugs to every city, country, and village in America, and they're able to provide protection for this supply line and all of their people. And they're getting all of these billions upon billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. Are you nuts or what? How stupid can you be to believe that silly story? There's not even folks, if you were to take all of the people and all of the industry in Colombia, you wouldn't account for 1% of the money that's produced through the manufacture, the growth, and the sale of drugs. There's nobody in Colombia who even begins to even distinguish themselves with even a minor portion of that kind of money. Why do you so eagerly? Like if you really, it's like you're waiting for them to tell you these stupid stories just so that you can believe them. Or have we just sunk into the depths and degradation of insanity? Oh, it's the Colombian drug kingpins that are doing all this stuff. Yep. Well, if it was them, Why do we go down there and kill thousands of people in Panama to bring Manuel Noriega back to this country and put him in jail? Ostensibly for drugs. But what we did, folks, to Noriega had absolutely nothing to do with drugs. I can't tell you exactly why that happened, but it wasn't about drugs. At all. He obviously did something that made Bush real mad. That's for sure. And by the way, I predicted the invasion of Panama just 3 days before it happened. Told the world on a broadcast of the Alan Handelman show when I was a guest that within 2 weeks we would invade Panama. 3 days later we did. I'm not going to tell you how I knew, because anybody who had any brains and had ears and was listening could have made the same prediction. The corruption, ladies and gentlemen, of present-day law enforcement had its counterpart as well. You see, investigations of the dope ring led by Arnold Rothstein just before the onset of the Great Depression revealed that the head of the U.S. Drug Police, established barely half a decade before, had been on Rothstein's payroll as a lawyer. Makes me just want to go get drunk. I can't believe this situation that we're in simply because we choose to be in this situation, because we have turned off the switch that activates our thinking process, and we refuse to use it. Just refuse for some reason. In the 1930s, newly appointed head of the newly reorganized Federal Bureau of Narcotics, whose name was Harry Anslinger, campaigned vigorously for harsher laws to combat the, quote, new menace, end quote, of marijuana use. This was in the 30s. The government paid farmers to raise marijuana during World War II. But this guy was targeting especially the role of jazz musicians. You can interpret that as blacks. And mules from Mexico, which means wetbacks. And the Sunday Oregonian cooperated by denouncing, quote, the great American brain killer dance music, end quote. This was in the 30s. Can you imagine? You know, I play music from the 30s all the time, and everybody says, oh, that's old stuff. It's not, some people appreciate it, like me. Brain killer music, they called it. While much of the media, when not recirculating fanciful stories about muggles, orgies leading to death, waxed by turns sentimentally protective, dragging the children down with dope, and sternly censorious Hollywood actress nabbed with dope, her film career now closed by death stories. All total BS, lies, crap, crapola. Pablum for babies who don't know how to think yet. The hysteria, ladies and gentlemen, drummed up by Anslinger succeeded in thwarting the movement to repeal the Harrison Act on the grounds that it was doing more harm than good, and led instead to the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act, which placed a prohibitive tax on the possession of hemp, and thus succeeded in outlawing constitutionally protected private behavior while being promoted ostensibly as a revenue enhancer. And to this day, ladies and gentlemen, so you think that drugs are illegal, and you think that you cannot legally possess marijuana, I'm telling you that that's not true. You can possess any amount of marijuana that you want to possess if you're willing to pay the tax to do it. Just like David Koresh could have owned as many machine guns as he wanted to own as long as he paid the $200 tax on each one of them. The truth is, he didn't even own one. Not one machine gun did David Koresh or any of his people own. You see, most of you don't know that the government just lies their head off If you believe for one moment that what happened in Waco, Texas was about a machine gun, then you're about as far from reality as you can possibly be. Do you really think all of that happened and they spent millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars to kill all those people and then burn their church to the ground because they didn't pay a $200 tax? When in the world will you wake up, ladies and gentlemen? It's beyond me. Hemp, folks, not so incidentally, was poised at that time to revolutionize the paper and textile industries as a cheap decorticator had recently been introduced, allowing the highly pulpy plant to be fully utilized for the first time. You see, the timber subsidiaries of the Hearst newspaper chain, which led the outcry against what Hearst first popularized as marijuana, would have lost a great deal of money if hemp would have been used to replace wood for paper. And you wouldn't have this big environmental thing and people driving steel spikes into trees and the lumber business dying. It would have just shifted over to the growing of hemp. You see, this was all a manipulation by powerful men with lots of money who had vested interest in producing wood pulp for paper. Meanwhile, the DuPont Corporation, folks, had just patented a highly polluting sulfuric acid process for wood pulp paper. And they had just told its stockholders that this process would account for 80% of its pulp shipments over the next 50 years. DuPont's chief financial backer was President Hoover's Secretary of the Treasury, Andrew Mellon of the Mellon Bank. In his role as secretary, he was responsible for the appointment of Ann Slinger, who later married his niece. Thus, the threat of competition was removed through the power of the state, at the same time as a further tool of repression was added to the arsenal of the control lobby. Don't you feel just a little bit foolish? Same thing is happening today, folks. Even as the last veneer of constitutional protection of individual rights is stripped away, and the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations as a treaty, which they say is legally binding on every agent of the government in the United States, become a dead letter, all purportedly in order to stop the use of certain officially disapproved psychoactive substances. The marketing of other such substances, far more deadly, proceeds apace, not only under the benevolent eye of Big Brother, but with subsidies provided courtesy of Mr. and Mrs. John Q. Citizen. Can anybody tell me why it's legal for anybody to go buy a bottle of booze and get blasted out of their mind anytime they want to? Or they can smoke cigarettes, cigarette after cigarette after cigarette after pack after pack after pack after pack after pack if they want to, which causes more problems, more deaths, more murders, more beatings, more thefts than drugs ever could. I find it just absolutely unbelievable. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and God bless each and every single one of you. And I sincerely mean that. And God save this great republic.
All of a sudden, in the middle of the night, there's a loud knock on your door. Hey, Hank, something's not right.
Throw out your arms. It's Denmark Massacre. We hear from the government. help you.
And I'm from the IRS with a power to tax. If you got a complaint, say the facts.
Get out of this house. Surrender your taxes. If you not home, you better obey if you want to come home. That's the good stuff and do what you're told.
Hillary Salala, Reno Janet Dyke, reading the words of General Albert Pike, the money founder of the Ku Klux Klan, engineer of the Masonic Master Plan. Pike said Lucifer is God across this land, and Clinton saying hit the mark in your right hand. While we're all dancing with the drums of the Fourth Reich, Clinton's preparing it for another huge tax hike. Order out of chaos, depression, inflation, creates a panic and rape the nation. Crisis creation, incite black and white, program agitation.
Don't make sense. You're surrounded by the UN in white and blue, the ATF, the men in black, of the One World Order.
But it's not new. Iron Mountain, computer beasts, and cattle mutilations. Black projects, UFOs, and weird genetic combinations. The Nazi doctors didn't die? Come on, get him. They came here with the OSS through Operation Paperclip. National ID, debit card? Yeah. Vaccination biochip, milk carton kids, genetic engineering. Clinton says her health plans for you and your own good. Sure. And Adolf Hitler's Robin Hood. Masonic mind manipulation, inciting riots is crisis creation. Biochip implantation, vaccinate your kid for UN identification.
This is a test for all of us. So I have today just one simple request. A comprehensive package of healthcare benefits that are always there and can never be taken away.
Atmospheric sociallusion, media hype, plant infusion, Masonic religion, it's a liar. Got you praying for a Luciferian Messiah.